Tim Mundorf, Nutrient Management Lead with Central Valley Ag. On this agronomy focused video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about going out and making yield estimates in corn. So here's kind of how we do it. So the first thing you want to do is pick maybe a representative area in the field, kind of average crop health, maybe yield area, yield maps in the past, looking at those, kind of deciding on an area. I do like to do at least 2 or 3 of them through a field and not just try to rely on one estimate. But to make a good estimate, really what you need to do is keep in mind, we work off 1/1000th of an acre. So on 30-inch rows, 1/1000th of an acre is 17 foot 5 inches. So take your tape measure out with you, go out into an area, make sure there's not a lot of, open areas or doubled up plants. Try to make it an average area of the field. Get out there away from your end rows a little bit, and then just drop a tape. And we talked about this earlier in one of our episodes as we talked about doing stand counts. A yield estimate's really the same thing, except the difference with a yield estimate, instead of looking at number of plants, I'm looking at number of ears, and that difference can be critical. And it's something you should make note of. As you drop that tape, the first thing you want to do is go do a stand count. But in this case, instead of just looking at plants, we're going to look at number of harvestable ears. If it's a little small ear like this and a little thin thing, and you don't think it's even going to make it through the stripper plates, or if it does come off, it's not going to give you very many kernels, I count that as just not a plant at all, or it's a barren plant. And I'll make a note between the number of ears I've got out there and the number of plants, because that gives me a clue next year, maybe some things I need to do different. So I go out there, I count the number of plants, but I also count the number of ears. The difference, of course, are barren or unharvestable, and something I want to make a note of. But once I've got that population count of number of ears, the next thing I want to do is take a sampling of those ears so I can take a look at them and get an estimate for the number of kernels I got out there. So as we think about how we estimate yield, the first thing we want to know is number of ears. The next thing we want to know is number of kernels per ear. And then the last thing is we want to make an estimate of the weight per kernel, or the number of kernels that's going to be in a bushel. So again, the way I go out there and pull ears, because if you just grab the ears you want, you'll always grab the large ears because they look great and it'll overestimate your yield. So what I do is I just leave that tape down at that 17 foot 5 inches that I've done for my 1/1000th of an acre, and I just grab the first ear on the first plant that's inside that area. And then what I do to make sure I'm not just grabbing ears I like or ears I don't like is I grab every 5th ear. So you start counting down, here's plant number 1, I rip that ear off and throw it on the ground. Then plant number 5, I grab that ear. Plant number 10, I grab that ear, and I work my way down. Now, this particular population that I pulled yesterday was 29,000. I had 29 plants in that 17 foot 5 inches. That means since that's 1/1000th of an acre, I've got a population of 29,000. So I've got the first step in making a yield estimate right there. I've got 29 ears. I think I did have 1 barren plant. So I had 30 plants, 29 ears. That's a 29,000 ear population. The next thing I need to do is just start husking these ears back. The number of kernels around on an ear is almost always a even number. It makes its rows, that corn plant makes the rows on the ears in groups of 2. So I just put my thumb on one set of 2. There's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I've got 14 rows around. I write that down, and then I count kernels long. And you stick with kernels that you're fairly certain you can harvest. So some guys will skip a kernel on the butt end. I'll usually count those. I don't see too many butt end kernels laying out in the field after it goes through the combine. But some of these really small kernels out on the end, I won't count them. So 1, 2, 3. So I've got 14 rows around, and I'm 42 what I would call harvestable kernels long in that row. And then I just need a calculator here, and I can calculate out how many kernels I have on that ear. And it's 588. And that's just 1. So again, I've taken off every 5th ear, and I need to count that on every single ear. So we husk the next one. And then we want to add these together and average them. So we've got a total of 3,530 kernels. We divide that across 6 ears. And that gives us an average ear kernel count of 588 per ear, and just double check that that makes sense. But yeah, as I look across these numbers, I've got a 400, a 500, actually I have a 588, 594, 624, and then one large ear is 738. But 588 is an average that makes sense. Now, our total number of kernels across the acre, we take that 588, and again, our population was 29,000. So we take 588 times 29,000, and I get 17,061,000, and I left the decimals in there, 666 kernels. So I'm a little over 17 million kernels. And then here's a key question, is how many kernels per bushel? And that varies a lot. I mean, I look at these ears and I've got a variety of kernel sizes out here. I've got one that's got some really large kernels and this larger ear here, and it's typical when you get more rows around, sometimes the kernels are a little bit smaller. Some other things to think about, typically a really high end or a low kernel weight might be 90,000 kernels per bushel. Sometimes we think of seed corn that way. Well, seed corn is grown on smaller plants. A lot of times those kernels aren't quite as large. Now, of course, it varies a lot by hybrid. When you've got really good fertility and maybe you've got irrigation or great growing conditions, I've seen that number of kernels per bushel as low as 70,000, maybe even 65,000 for like national corn grower contest type fields. Usually you're somewhere in between. So for a dry land field, which is what this is, we've kind of had a stressful year, I would divide that number by 80,000 kernels per bushel. And I come up with a yield estimate of 213 at 80,000. Now, another way you might look at it would be, and I'll multiply that back out by 80,000, is this field does have really good fertility, and frankly, it's growing really well, so I might try, what would 75,000 kernels per bushel look like? And that would be 227 bushels to the acre at 75K. So again, it's a little bit of a judgment call, and these yield estimates are never perfect. Your combine is going to do a lot better job of giving you final yields. But to get an idea of what you've got going on, and this is just one estimate, I would recommend you do a minimum of 3 per field, but that's basically how you do it. Again, if you have questions about something like this, see your field sales agronomist. We can help walk you through these things. We'd love to go walk out in your fields with you because we wanted to make an assessment of what some of the plans we've made together, how they've worked out with you. I'd like to go out in your combine with you and see how your harvest is going as well. So again, with Central Valley Ag, I'm Tim Mundorf, Nutrient Management Lead.